Hello everyone, this is Bottled Sky, my action exploration game set in space where you're cut off from society and must survive in a lawless alien world. Welcome to another devlog where I talk about the new stuff my team and I have been working on this past month, and often I will also describe my intent for how I design various features of the game. This video is going out a bit later than I usually prefer this month because I was doing a lot of tweaking and redesigning later in September so that I could have more polished content I could show off. Something else I was worried about before making this video was that I don't strictly have new content this month, so I wasn't sure what I was going to talk about for this video. But sometimes game development is like that. New content isn't the only thing that makes a game better, and sometimes you have to focus on making sure you have a solid foundation to build new content on top of. So that's what I want to discuss in this video, amongst some other things that have been on my mind this last month. I'm going to start off by referencing my previous video where I showed off two new abilities that players can use during combat and resource gathering portions of the game. The drill launch was one of those abilities. For some context, the core mechanic of Bottled Sky is this giant drill on the front of your shuttle. Using that is how you engage with combat and resource gathering. Whenever you accelerate into a valid target such as an asteroid or an enemy, you latch on to that target and start drilling, which deals a constant stream of damage. The main upside of this action in combat is that whatever you're drilling can't fight back, which is excellent if you're in a one-on-one situation. There are two major downsides that you need to contend with, making combat not as simple as just drill and win. First off, it's very close range, which means you have to first be able to approach an enemy before you can start drilling. Ranged enemies can make that more difficult, which I talked about a couple of videos ago. The second downside is that once you do start drilling, you're basically stuck for a short time and remain open to attacks from other enemies if you're dealing with a group. This leads to interesting combat that, if balanced well, will require you to observe enemy patterns and only attack when you know you can finish one of them off and free yourself before getting hit by others. I want to give the player a variety of options for movement and reposition in combat to assist with this, but I've already talked about that in previous videos and will save further discussion for a later video. One suggestion I've received from several players is that I could add shooting projectiles to help deal with groups of enemies from a distance. I'm definitely going to add shooting into the game at some point. The shuttle even has these little guns on the wings, but what I do not want to do is take the focus away from the core mechanic, being the drill. If the drill is not the most viable option for a basic scenario like group combat, then I would either need to avoid group combat, or significantly shift or split the design focus such that the drill is no longer the only core mechanic. I don't really like either of those options. Not having group combat removes a huge amount of design space. If I only had one-on-one combat, then every individual combat encounter needs to be interesting, which is hard to do when a core feature of the drill is that it deals a constant stream of damage and your target can't fight back once you start drilling. If you remember the hamster enemy from my earlier videos, this actually shows that I tried this approach and made a complex enemy with a lot of behaviors and even gave it a way to fight back while being drilled. I ultimately ended up discarding this type of enemy design after seeing a lot of players struggle to understand how to fight it, which I discussed in much more detail in an earlier video. I might revive that design concept again as something that may appear later in the game after players have mastered all of the basic mechanics, but for now I don't want to get ahead myself and instead focus on early game content. The alternative option of shifting or splitting the design focus is also unappealing because I'm trying to target a specific experience with the drill being the core mechanic. The team is small, we only have limited resources, and I'd like to focus on making that one experience really satisfying rather than split the focus. Variety is good, but only if we can give enough attention to each aspect of that variety. Ideally, any variety I design for the game is something that is still based around the drill being the core mechanic, which is where the drill launch comes in. The drill launch was showcased in my previous video, but it was unfinished. The main purpose for this new ability is to provide a ranged option for players in a way that still requires the use of the drill and good positioning skills. The way it works is that while drilling you can press a button to instantly launch your target forwards. Then, if the launch target collides with anything else, then it deals damage to itself and the object it collided with. In combat, there are multiple use cases for this. If there is an enemy that you're having trouble getting close to without receiving damage, then you can launch a nearby object to deal damage that way. Asteroids are valid targets to launch, and they're always abundant. Using this ability in combat requires some planning and positioning skills though, so I'm not worried about this being strictly a better option than just drilling the enemy. Another use case is in group combat. Using this ability will instantly detach you from your target and give you control again, which you can use to avoid incoming attacks from other enemies. Finally, launching an enemy into another enemy plainly means that this ability lets you damage multiple enemies at once, so it allows the drilling mechanic to be useful in group combat. Who needs to shoot projectiles when you can turn your enemies into projectiles? When I showed this off in the last video, there were many aspects including the damage that were not yet implemented, so I feel like I can show this off again and highlight the changes. You've already seen this ability in action in these clips during this whole voiceover discussion, but I'll shut up for a moment so you can appreciate the new audio and visual effects. Moving on to my next topic, the other new ability I showed off in the last video, backflips. The backflip is meant to be an action you can use to dodge incoming attacks. This was created before the drill launch and eventually led to the creation of drill launching caused by using the backflip while drilling, but I ended up deciding to make them two separate abilities. If you watched my last video, you might remember me making these points. When the shuttle is doing a backflip at the same time, I felt that these two abilities were fighting for my attention. When you do a backflip, you lose control of the shuttle entirely for nearly a whole second. Couple that with not actually traveling any distance in that time, then it feels like the follow-through is missing. So yeah, I said those things, but in the clips I showed you earlier, the shuttle is now doing a backflip during a drill launch. Did I change my mind? No. My first point about the two abilities fighting for attention is certainly still valid, but a team member pointed out that it might be worthwhile to have other people play it and see if they prefer the drill launch with or without the backflip. I haven't gotten around to the testing part yet, but I agreed that it wouldn't hurt to have other people test it. The second point, about losing control of the shuttle however, is something I can fix. This seemed fine at first, but after playing and testing it for a month, I started to dislike it more and more. It seemed okay if you were starting from an idle position or a normal, non-boosted speed, but if you were boosting and moving fast, then it felt like hitting a wall. This might have just been a me problem because as the programmer I know what's really going on under the hood, but my team disagreed and thought it felt fine. But I'm also the lead on this project, and if I really don't like what I was feeling, then it's in my power to just decide that this version of the backflip needed to be scrapped and started over. After all, I don't need playtesters to validate my own feelings. This is partially why there is no completely new content this month. I actively made the choice to undo a significant amount of my work and try again. This didn't undo other aspects like the animation or the audio. Those things are just still in the works and have been slow to progress. So here is how the new version of the backflip works. You no longer freeze and lose control. Instead, you are gradually slowed down based on this curve here, which took a lot of tweaking until it felt right. The x-axis represents time, and the y-axis represents a multiplier on your speed. Also, your ability to rotate is significantly reduced for a portion of this time, but not eliminated, after which you regain full rotation control right before the end of the animation. This still looked a bit awkward if you performed it from idle, so I made sure that using the ability gives you an initial boost so that you at least have some momentum to make it look right. There's still more visual and audio effects that I need before I can call this finished, but I'm a lot happier with the physics of this ability. It remains to be seen after external playtesting if it feels better to backflip or not during a drill launch, but I think the non-drill launch backflip is here to stay. Moving on to a related topic, the boost ability. This has been around for a while, but I'll recap it quickly. Pressing the boost button will give you an instantaneous boost in momentum and simultaneously cancel out any momentum you had beforehand. This, coupled with the high rotation speed, allows you to turn and change direction very quickly without needing to slow down and build up speed again, which makes handling feel so much faster and more responsive. Holding down the boost button beyond this initial boost will continue to provide momentum in the direction the shuttle is facing, among other small tweaks to normal physics, but this does not constantly cancel out your momentum. Nothing about this has changed, but what I want to talk about is the cost of using these things. Up in the top left, you can see a yellow bar which represents your boost gauge. Pressing the boost button and gaining that initial boost comes with what I'll call the initial boost cost. Holding the boost button will gradually drain this gauge at a specific rate, which I'll call the boost drain rate. One exception to this though is that it does not drain for half a second after paying that initial boost cost. To put some hard numbers on this, at the current stage of development, the boost gauge's maximum capacity is 100. The boost drain rate is 25 per second, meaning that you could continuously boost for 4 seconds before it runs out and you can no longer continue boosting until at least some of it has been replenished. Natural regeneration triggers after about 1 second of not using any of the boost gauge and refills fairly quickly. The initial boost cost is not a set value and is instead equal to the boost drain rate times the 0.5 seconds of time where the boost gauge doesn't gradually deplete after paying that initial cost. So with the numbers I've just given, the initial boost cost is currently equal to 12.5. These numbers are arbitrary and might be rebalanced later, but the fundamental design has been in the game for a while and I've been happy with it ever since. Let's talk about my design intent and why I chose to have it set up like this. Then I'll talk about what's new here. When I described the boost ability, I chose to break it into 2 parts. The first part is the momentum cancellation and instantaneous boost. The second part is the continuous speed increase with modified physics control. The first part is probably the most important part of this ability when it comes to maneuvering in combat. Without that initial cost, there would be a way to exploit the gradual drain speed by simply tapping the boost button for 1 frame, which at 60 FPS means that such a useful ability would only cost nearly half a point in boost, but would actually depend on your frame rate. It would cost twice as much if you were playing the game at 30 FPS, since a frame lasts longer. Having an initial cost to using the boost ability means that you now must spend a meaningful amount of this resource that reflects its usefulness, and also normalizes the cost to be more frame rate independent. There is one other important detail here though, and that is the 0.5 seconds after paying the initial cost where the gauge won't drain. There are 2 reasons for this. The first is that this also makes sure that every time you use the boost ability just to get that initial momentum cancel and speed increase, it always costs the same as long as you hold the key for less than half a second. The second reason is that while I wanted to increase the cost of the initial boost, I didn't want to inadvertently increase the cost of continuously boosting too. There is one slight downside currently, that is that I can't change the boost drain rate without also changing the initial boost cost, because it's not a standalone value. I could change this, but I don't see a reason to do so currently. A relatively recent change here is that you don't need to pay the initial boost cost if you start boosting while drilling, because you aren't getting any initial benefit, but you still get a continuous multiplier to your drill damage and boost drain rate remains the same in this case. Okay, now for some of the new additions. The 2 new abilities, the Backflip and the Drill Launch, now also cost some amount of your boost gauge. Considering that both of these abilities involve some boost in movement, and provide some additional value beyond just movement, it made sense to give them a small cost so that the pre-existing gameplay remains relevant. This makes sure, for example, that spamming the drill launch doesn't become the default option that replaces regular drilling, or spamming the backflip over and over doesn't become a dominant strategy over just regular dodging. There should be times where one is more useful than the other, and you need to read the situation to determine the best course of action. That eventually becomes a question of balancing, which is something I'll wait to do until much later in development, but now I have the tools to do so. There's a few more old and new quality of life features regarding boost gauge costs that are now more relevant to talk about. The next one is pretty simple. If you don't have enough remaining boost gauge to spend on an ability, but you still have some left, then you can still spend the remaining amount to do the ability. I don't want the player to have to do any mental mathematics in the heat of the action to figure out if they have enough boost. Considering this UI doesn't give you that detailed information, I'd rather the player be able to just look and see if they have anything left at all to make decisions. For example, if the backflip ability costs 30 and you have a maximum gauge level of 100, then after using it 3 times you've spent 90 boost and you have 10 left. But I don't want the player to have to think about this. They should be able to just look and see that there is some boost gauge left unspent and can still use that to do a 4th backflip with no downsides. Once the gauge is completely empty, however, you can't do any actions that require boost until at least some of it has been replenished. The next couple of quality of life features are related to the new abilities specifically. I mentioned that both of them involve giving you some kind of speed boost, so I considered what should happen if you were already boosting. I decided that these abilities should cost less if you are already boosting or if you pay that initial boost cost within the last half a second. If the backflip normally costs 30, then performing it while already boosting would subtract the initial boost cost from that number and would now cost 17.5, because theoretically you've already paid the initial 12.5 boost cost. The drill launch received similar treatment. Since the backflip also slows you down, then I decided that holding down the boost during the backflip would also temporarily prevent the gauge from draining. This does have the unintended side effect that if you hold down the boost, then you could get multiple backflips at a reduced cost and be able to do 5 backflips in a row instead of 4. However, I find that there isn't much benefit to doing this, so I'm okay with leaving it in. The final boost quality of life feature I'd like to talk about is related to this zoom out portion of the drill launch that I didn't mention earlier. While drilling, you can now use a toggle to zoom out, which lets you aim better for drill launch purposes. While zoomed out, your drill doesn't do any damage. I did this because presumably you wouldn't want to accidentally destroy the target you're drilling if it looks like you wanted to launch it instead. Because you can boost while drilling, and the only benefit you normally get is a multiplier to your damage, and because you don't do any damage while in this state, I decided that boosting shouldn't have a cost in this state. You'll still get all of the visual effects that make it look like you're boosting though. That covers all of the quality of life minutiae of the boost gauge that I worked on in September that I thought was interesting to talk about. Many of these quality of life features are generally geared towards reducing the cost and increasing the accessibility of actions that use the boost gauge. That's because I want this to be a limited short-term resource for advanced players, but I don't want it to feel so limiting as a new player. I've sanded down the sharp corners of this so that mistakes are not punished harshly, but still nudges newer players toward learning how to manage the resource better. Ultimately, I want Bottled Sky to be accessible to less experienced players, because I feel that this game is quite unique with its controls, and there aren't many other games that you could draw extensive experience from to apply here. I'm trying to tread a fine line between making sure that the game is intuitive and easy to learn, while still having plenty of depth to explore and master its action combat. Next up, I want to show off that the newest enemy we built now has proper animations and sound effects. This is the Bottery. It will be the first ranged enemy that you might encounter. It has fairly simple behaviors that it follows. It picks out a nearby valid combat target, which includes inanimate objects like asteroids, because I want it to appear like a low intelligence droid causing havoc. Then it slowly turns to face its target and starts preparing this attack, which fires a projectile. Then, if the target is still alive, it moves to a new position near its target and turns to fire again. Rinse and repeat. It's pretty much done. One of my favorite parts of this enemy is we've reused the feature that makes the 2D shuttle look 3D. These aren't baked in animations. The slight rotations you're seeing are actually in response to the game's physics. There might be minor tweaks to the AI, audio, or animations that we'll do after external testing and feedback, but I don't see it changing much from what we see here. Next, we want to build out this faction a little bit more, meaning that there will be other enemies with a similar visual style that embody the theme of simplistic AI spacecraft that have gone rogue and will attack anything in sight. Here are some of the concept art and animations that we built so far. This new enemy should have very similar behaviors to the Chomper enemy we built a few months ago, so we've put Chomper on the sidelines a bit until we can build a cohesive art style that allows alien creature designs to look natural alongside these metallic entity designs. The goal of these first two enemies will be to introduce the basics of combat to the player, by having the player encounter different combinations of them. One is melee and one is ranged, so by encountering different sized groups of these, it should help us understand and polish all of the basics of combat, such as what UI we might need, unique combat camera motion, early game difficulty balancing, and more. There isn't much more I can tease about this new enemy, as it's only just been started recently. I haven't even named it yet, so let's move on to my final topic, which I'll keep short. I didn't want to talk about this earlier in the video, but I think I should mention and provide my thoughts on some of the drama surrounding Unity and its pricing changes this last month. I've received a couple of questions and been in a lot of discussions about what this means for Bottled Sky since it is built in Unity. I won't go into detail about what those changes are. There are a myriad of videos on the topic from hundreds of other channels that describe the issue. Unity has largely walked back many of the proposed changes, but I'll say that even if they hadn't, it's too late for my team and I to jump ship to a new engine. The only other engine I vaguely know how to use is GameMaker, and I'm not keen on returning. The cost of learning a new engine and then porting a year and a half of work hoping that it will turn out okay is just not something I can justify. So Bottled Sky is staying in Unity. Once Bottled Sky is done and released, I had already planned to start skilling up with newer tech in the industry because the next game I want to make is something I know I don't have the technical know-how for. That's likely not going to happen for a few years maybe, so we'll see what the game dev landscape looks like when the time comes. However, I'd be wary of starting any new project in Unity. People still have questions, and Unity hasn't exactly provided the answers we needed to hear, so even if everything gets completely walked back, Unity's reluctance to operate like a normal business and be transparent about major changes rightly has everyone on edge. I don't think Unity will completely collapse. The engine still offers a lot of unique advantages over other engines, but the decision to choose Unity in future can no longer be an easy one. Sorry to wrap up the video in a more somber tone. It's been one of the many things that have been on my mind of late. Way back in January this year, I travelled to Sweden to stay at a place called Spell Collective, which is also our publisher, and they have been hugely helpful in providing everything my team and I need to work on Bottled Sky full-time. I'm not an EU citizen, however, so I can't stay indefinitely, and in October I'll be travelling back home. I intend to return to Sweden at some point, but I first need to find some money to afford travel again and sort out a new visa. This is naturally going to slow down my ability to work on Bottled Sky for the next 3 to 6 months, depending on what opportunities I can find for income. I'm going to still try and put out monthly YouTube videos like I normally do, and because I have my old private office space, I can get back into live streaming the game's development on Twitch. Look forward to that sometime in November, but expect there to likely be less content in future videos until I can get back to working on Bottled Sky full-time. I think I've ranted long enough, so let's cut to the end of the video. If you enjoyed this video, then consider leaving a like and a comment. Subscribe if you want to be notified about future videos. Check the description to find links to other social media where you can follow Bottled Sky. Thanks for watching, that's all for now, and I'll see you later.